If you saw my last video, I upgraded this deck by replacing the balusters with stainless steel cables. As a result, I have a stack of balusters made of Ipe, a beautiful hardwood. In this video, I'll show how I repurpose some balusters to make picture frames with my radial arm saw. Since Ipe is so incredibly dense and hard, it will quickly dull the steel blades on my planer or jointer. Therefore, I'm going to keep the frame profile simple and limit work to my radial arm saw with carbide blades. To start, I'll rip the balusters into two pieces. When cutting thick lumber or dense wood like this Ipe, sometimes it's easier to cut the wood in two passes rather than trying to cut the full thickness at once. Therefore, I'm ripping a little less than halfway through from each side. It's also helpful to use a smaller diameter blade to gain greater mechanical advantage, especially when using a motor with limited power. Here I'm using an 8-inch thin kerf Freud LU83, which is an excellent blade for the radial arm saw. The blade is lowered to the full depth, and the final cuts are made from each side to obtain two identical pieces. A rabbet is needed to house the glass mat and backing. This could be made by making two perpendicular cuts with the saw blade, but I chose to use a dado blade instead. To set the depth of the rabbet, the blade is lowered until it touches the wood. The blade is then lowered 3 turns, or 3/8 of an inch. To set the width of the rabbet, the blade is set to touch the edge of the board, and then I use my micro adjuster to move the blade in 3/8 of an inch. To make accurate 90-degree corners, I've installed my auxiliary fence to first cut all of the right-hand miters. I have a separate video that describes this technique in detail, and I've included a link to it in the video description. After all of the right-hand miters have been cut, the normal fence is installed and the left-hand miters are cut to exact length with the aid of a stop block. I'm gluing the frame together using T88 epoxy. Clamp the pieces together until dry using your method of choice. Here I'm using my assembly table with wedges. On this frame I'm using miter clamps. Corner pinch clamps are also useful to pull the corners together tight. The frame is given a good sanding to smooth the wood and mitered joints. Mitered corners should be strengthened for longevity. In particular, Ipe can be difficult to glue because it's not very porous. Installing corner splines would be a good choice. However, I'm going to try another technique that I recently saw, which uses plugs glued into holes drilled into the mitered joints. I'm a little skeptical if this technique will work well with Ipe because it still heavily relies on glue, but I thought I'd give it a try anyway. The plugs are cut from a dowel and then glued into the holes with epoxy. The plugs are sanded flush with the frame. I'm applying a Danish oil to bring out the rich color of this wood. After allowing it to penetrate for about 30 minutes, the excess is wiped off with a rag. Glass 3/32 of an inch thick is cut to fit the frame. Mat board is also cut to size. A mat cutter is useful to cut the beveled opening to frame the photo or artwork. Finally, foam board is cut to size and will be used to hold the components into the frame. This wood is too hard to use push points, so I'm drilling holes to install turn buttons instead. The frames came out great. Thanks for watching.